Kathleen Ramos, and I'm joined today by doctoral student and ESOL teacher Jessica Shirley. We've had the pleasure of getting to know each other this semester by co-teaching an ESOL methodology class. So I learned through that experience that Jessica has been putting translanguaging to work in her practice, particularly during the pandemic and the switch to online teaching. And we thought we would share some of that with you today. So Jessica, do you want to go to the next slide? Okay, so today we just want to give you an introduction or kind of an overview of translanguaging pedagogy and why it's important for multilingual learners, but importantly to discuss some translanguaging examples and bring them to life a little bit. Then we would like to do a short breakout room session in which you can generate ideas or share ideas about translanguaging practices that you may already be using, and then invite a conversation with the larger group. So I think Jessica is first going to conduct a little poll just so we have a sense of your level and experience with translanguaging practices.
Thank you, Dr. Ramos. I am putting the link in the chat. If you can go ahead and click on that one, open the form and fill it out for us, please. And Dr. Ramos, would you like to share your screen so I can take a look at the results?
Sure. You need to stop sharing yours though for a moment. Okay, or we can just pause for a moment while you take a look at the results.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for participating. While we're waiting, I wanted to say that one of my former graduate students has joined us on this session, sent me a message in the chat. So I'm delighted to see Faven here and everybody else. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
I definitely had to drop by when I saw your name. I was excited.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just say, I have to confess, I'm not exactly sure what translanguaging is, so I don't know if I'm doing it or not.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, it's kind of what we wanted to find out from the poll, and no worries, because we are going to give an overview and introduction to that, to translanguaging pedagogy.
Okay, so I do see a responses on here, and there's nine participants.
I think actually we have a few more who have joined, so, but maybe let's just share what you have so far, Jessica.
Okay. Oh, somebody else joined. Let me go ahead and send them the link in the chat. As they join, they don't have the link. They have to reshare it.
Okay. Yes, that's something new I learned about technology this week as well.
So these are the results so far. So we have 67% saying that they're not sure, and 33% saying that they are sure, that they have implemented them. And then we have how would they rate their knowledge. So we have a split there, a three-way split. And then for the last question, how would you rate your level of experience in using or implementing translanguaging? And we have a 50% saying low, with 30 and 20% with average or no experience.
Okay.
So we have a good
Thank
idea.
You. Yeah, that's very helpful.
I will go ahead and go back to presenter mode.
Okay, thanks, Jessica.
You're welcome.
So it's helpful to know, and I would like to start by just acknowledging that I was an ESOL teacher, secondary teacher for 10 years, and I had not heard of the term translanguaging practices until a few years ago, but when I re-examined the kinds of things that I did in my classroom, I believe that I was creating translanguaging spaces without knowing that that's what they were called. So as this is a practice-oriented session, we are going to do just a kind of a quick theoretical and research-based look into translanguaging practices. There is a lot to learn here. I have been just avidly reading and learning about translanguaging pedagogy over the last couple of years. And so at the end, we have a good set of resources for you to continue learning, okay? A lot of the learning comes from Ofelia Garcia and colleagues, and Dr. Garcia is at the City University of New York, or CUNY system. They've done a tremendous amount of work around translanguaging pedagogy, making it accessible to teachers and teacher educators. And from that research, we know that it really is, Dr. Garcia sees it as a philosophy of education and language that is centered on equity for bilingual learners who are often, as we know, still minoritized and marginalized in our school systems, okay? So another important idea is that translanguaging pedagogy values and understands that multilingual learners bring one unitary language system, an integrated system of their languages, their linguistic repertoires to the table. They're not separate systems, and that they use their integrated language systems for learning new ideas, creating knowledge, and communicating with others. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we practice translanguaging, what we're doing as educators is inviting multilingual learners to draw on their full linguistic repertoires on all of their language systems, whether those are two or multiple language systems, as learning tools and meaning-making resources. And when we do that, we also affirm and value and invite in the translanguaging practices that are normal, that are part of everyday life in bilingual communities for bilingual or multilingual learners. Translanguaging practices also value all languages as equally prestigious, right? So it kind of helps to avoid seeing English as the monolingual norm and the golden bar to achieve, but recognizes that all languages have equal validity in the lives of the people who use them daily. And it also means looking at communication in classrooms, whether verbal or written, using multimodal ways of communicating to both build knowledge and to share knowledge in the classroom, okay? So next slide. I emphasize this point because if you're a teacher educator or a pre-K to 12 teacher, this is a really important shift and strong idea that was embedded in the new WIDA, English Language Development Standards framework that was released in 2020. In fact, we have here an excerpt from, I think this is actually page 19. Okay, so we see here that multimodality, or using many ways, oral, written, visual, kinesthetic ways of learning and of sharing knowledge in the classroom, are valued in the new frameworks, in our growing knowledge of working with multilingual learners. And if you take a look at bullet point 3 there, you see that TESOL in the WIDA frameworks has made a point of emphasizing that that includes translanguaging practices, or opening those spaces for multilingual learners to use their full linguistic repertoires for learning in the classroom. And that helps to expand their language and literacy development, as well as deepen their content learning. Next slide, please. Okay, so we actually have about, I would say, more than 20 years that Ofelia Garcia and colleagues kind of kicked off this terminology and research in translanguaging pedagogy, and many other people have joined contributing to this research base. But if we could kind of say it in a nutshell today, we would say there's 4 main reasons or goals or purposes of using translanguaging pedagogy in our PK to 12 work, okay? So one is to support multilingual learners, to scaffold them as they engage with and comprehend with those complex grade level content area concepts and text that can be challenging as they are also developing and building their English proficiency at the same time, okay? So really it's a way of looking at, it's a stance, translanguaging stance is a way of looking at broadening or expanding linguistic practices in the school system across content areas and grade levels so that multilingual learners can bring everything that they have to the table, all of their knowledge and their ways of using language and their knowledge about language and their ways that their knowledge about language and their language is connected to everything that they know, as it is for all of us, okay? So we're kind of expanding their recognizing that, yes, they do also have to learn to communicate in academic English, that we want them to have many linguistic worlds. We want them to expand their practices of communicating, building knowledge, sharing knowledge across content areas in many ways, in a way that creates a space for their bilingualism and their bilingual ways of knowing. And I think it only goes without saying that this clearly contributes to their socio-emotional development as well. When we remember that identity, language, and culture are intimately connected to identity. So when we take away language opportunities or devalue multilingual learners' first language or languages in the classroom, then we are devaluing part of their identity, which can be demotivating and actually demoralizing for learners. So translanguaging pedagogy is also a way of uplifting and affirming bilingual identity in classrooms. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to end this part of the presentation, as this is a practice-oriented presentation, by just also suggesting that the research has shown us that translanguaging pedagogies are not only transformative for multilingual learners, but also for educators who embrace this translingual or translanguaging stance in their work, okay? And that is in the work of the scholars who have been studying this for many years now, tightly connected to educating for social justice. So I'm just going to read this quote as it really speaks to my heart, and I hope it will speak to yours. Educators teach in order to discover what in the child's arsenal of language features can be enhanced through interactions with others and texts that have different language features. They do not tell students to stop using their own languages or to stop drawing on them for learning. Equipped with translanguaging theory, educators leverage the students' full linguistic repertoires to teach and assess, enabling a more socially just and equitable education for bilingual students. So as I said, there's so much to learn about this, and we hope the resources at the end will be helpful. And I plan to continue my learning journey about translanguaging pedagogy. But right now I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, who is going to share some translanguaging practices in action.
Good morning, everyone. I am so delighted to be here and be sharing this platform with you all. So these are the what's, the whys, and the hows of translanguaging practices. And I'm going to provide some examples of what I did when we were back teaching and learning virtually last school year. Let me go ahead. And so just to give you a quick brief background, the following examples of translanguaging practices are from last school year during my school year teaching virtually. I worked with kindergarten emergent bilingual students as I supported their learning of English as an additional language. So I was their ESOL teacher. And in my caseload of emergent bilinguals, I had students whose home language included Spanish, Arabic, Amharic, Pashto, Mongolian, and Creole. So we're a very diverse school. Although these tends to be a more negative focus on the experiences with virtual learning and teaching, I want to focus on the positive learning points as well, which is the focus of the presentation. What do we do that we could hone into translanguaging practices, especially providing opportunities for students to use their home language at home, in which home became their learning space while learning virtually. Majority of my kindergarten students had an adult, or what we refer to as a big person, sitting next to them, because sometimes this big person was an older sibling or an aunt or a grandparent, not necessarily their mom and dad. This big person was a valuable resource in our learning, as they sat beside their child during our lessons, and they also got to get a glimpse of what learning was in the classroom virtually. This big person would be the person who would ask us, the teachers, any clarifying questions about the assignments, explain these in their home language to their child, and work with their child at home in their home language, while also, like I mentioned, being part of this learning process, something that we don't necessarily get when we are back in person learning. I would also include in my lessons virtually opportunities for them to explain and share their learning to the big person sitting next to them in their home language in a smaller breakout room. What did you learn? What are we doing? Explain to the person sitting next to you what you like about what we are reading. In this example, one of the activities included listening to the book A Very Hungry Caterpillar, written by Eric Carle. In this picture, the students drew their favorite part of the book on a small whiteboard or paper or whatever materials they had at home. I invited the students to share these with the person sitting next to them. I would ask the students to keep themselves unmuted so that I could hear all of the different languages and conversations happening. And you can just see smiles upon smiles on their faces, and just the relief of being able to use their home language at home. And it was okay to use it in the virtual space when learning with me. Then we would come back as a whole group into the small, or as a whole group, I'm sorry, from the small breakout room. And then the students then share in English what they learned or what their favorite part was. So this is just one of the examples, because one of the units in kindergarten is the caterpillars turning into butterflies and the life cycle. And then another activity that we have are culture boxes. Usually, typically during the second half of the school year, when attending school in person, we usually invite the students to dress in attire that is representative of their home country. They bring some items that are significant in their culture. These oftentimes include toys, books, currency, souvenirs, and other artifacts from their country. They put these inside a box they have decorated. And however, due to our shift to remote learning from home last school year, we had to be creative as teachers. What are we going to do to continue this experience, but from home, and that we can also continue to learn from our students? What was impactful last school year was that even though we were virtual, this allowed us to learn so much more from our students' families, as they were very present in their child's learning and they felt comfortable communicating with us via Zoom. Zoom is a platform we also use for instruction. It was amazing to witness the strong rapport that this type of virtual space provided between the teachers and families. During in-person learning, it is a bit more challenging to have this made available to the parents and the family. Sometimes they need to schedule an appointment to come into the school. And now, since we are back in person, it's a little bit more challenging because they're not really allowed to be in those schools due to the whole pandemic. So with being on Zoom, the parents would join us with their child first thing in the morning, and they would talk to us, they would ask us questions, and you can really feel the strong rapport being established. This strong rapport is something that as teachers, we really want. We really want to establish, and not only establish, but sustain and continue while in person. But with being virtual last school year, we really helped to truly sustain this rapport. For the virtual cultural boxes, what we decided to do was to have the parents share pictures with us. They would email us the pictures, or they would use Class Dojo to send us the pictures. We organized all of these pictures in a slideshow format using Google Slides. What was eye-opening last school year about the culture boxes were how involved the parents really truly desire to be. They requested a time frame from us that would work best with their work schedules, with their daily schedules, to be next to their child and be part of this presentation, sitting next to their child, which was wow, it was amazing. Along with their parent, the child showed us how to cook some of their country's favorite dishes live. They would be streaming live and we would be watching what they were doing. They would explain to us their dishes, how they did stuff. And they would also go around their house and show us artifacts representative of their home country. They would also teach us some words in their home language, how to write in their home language, how they would read in their home language, something that we don't get when we're in person. During this time, I was also cooking some tamales, which is the picture that you see on the bottom right. And this is a specialty dish from Mexico, my country. I showed them my steaming pot of tamales and we just started having conversations and just continuing this report.
Jessica, I think you have to go to the next slide so they can see the tamales.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
There we go. Sorry about that. It's on the bottom right, the tamales, and on the top left is a student eating his famous dish or favorite dish from El Salvador. And he's really enjoying that. And he's dressed in his attire. The culture box presented, the project also presented us with the opportunity to invite parents to realize that there were other parents who share the same home language and they wanted to have this community within themselves, amongst themselves, help each other out, translate for one another. So it was just a very supportive virtual class community. And another resource that we used during virtual teaching was Unite for Literacy. I have two examples on here of two books, and we did the similar activities or the same pattern. I just want to show the different pictures. Unite for Literacy provides numerous stories that are more diverse and representative of our students. Many of the stories have an option for the story to be read by the computer to the student and in various languages. In this slide, I provide an example of the many different languages that Unite for Literacy provides. Not every book has this option, but the majority do. And this was a great resource that parents asked us to include more of and share out to them, because the students would end the lesson with me. They would then see their parents and then they want to talk about the story and retell the story to them in their home language. And the parents would want to go back in, where did you get the story? So they would ask me where we got the story. I would share the link to them. And then they were just reading, listening to the story in their home language, reading in their home language. So it was just amazing to see how much involvement there was and how much the families really wanted to be included in this. In this picture, the students were provided with the opportunity to retell the story to a family member when they were with me, or myself, or to the big person. In this picture, one student and myself were already back in the building in person. I want to say is this one, yes. So I blur my background on this one, but I was back in the building, so was the other student. And so that student, I was that big person to that student, even though I did not speak their language, which was Arabic. I still invited them to share out what they had written and drawn on their paper or their whiteboard. Those who were still back at home, they still continue with the same routine. They retold the story or their favorite part to the person sitting next to them. And then we will come back and just share out in English what we learned or what our favorite part was. And as I mentioned, the parents just love being able to be part of this learning. Even if they weren't there, they still knew what was going on in the virtual space. Here I provided sentence starters for the students to I like that, and then tell me what it is that you like about this story that we read together. And then this student, once they figure out that they could just flip the video on their tablet, they just did it like, there you go. Here you go, Miss Shirley. Here you go. You don't have to see my face, but here it is. The other students were still trying to peek out and then just trying to work out with technology, how to work it out. And those are my examples for translanguaging practices. It was really an eye-opening experience. And I still try to continue these within our in-person learning. And I still have to learn the many languages my students speak and how to best provide these translanguaging opportunities. But we are doing so much right now. And I think we are into breakout rooms, Dr. Ramos.
Yes, thank you, Jessica, so much for sharing that. So while Jessica is getting the breakout rooms set up, because we really want to invite a space for everybody to have a chance to generate some ideas, we have just 2 questions that we're going to answer. So when we go into breakout rooms, Jessica will send in this slide, right? So we have the questions. But while she's setting up the rooms, I just wanted to share how I was just so impressed and heartened to meet Jessica and to learn about the way that, first of all, she made that shift to virtual instruction, which I'm sure the pre-K to 12 practicing teachers on this session know how very challenging that was. But she really was the very first person who told me something positive about the shift to virtual instruction and the way that she learned so much about her families and their cultural and language practices by teaching small children with a big person in the room in that space. And I also wanted to just emphasize that there is no way, there's no one way to do translanguaging practices. It's not to say, if you want to practice translanguaging pedagogy, this is what you do. It really is a philosophy and a stance of opening spaces, being responsive to the learners that you have, and figuring out different ways that you might be able to create opportunities to value and especially allow learners to think and use their languages as tools for learning. So we're going to take, I think, Heather Z, are you joining a breakout room as well?
I'll stay out of a breakout room.
Okay. Okay, so then I think that we will have 2 breakout rooms of 4 each, Jessica. Okay, and you can put me in one and you in the other one. And let's take a quick time check. It's 11:29, so maybe let's come back together at around 11:37. Okay, so we'll take about 8 minutes in the breakout rooms, and we should see a link to join one soon, right, Jessica?
Yes, I'm opening up the rooms right now.
Do you want to also maybe copy the questions into the chat? Just, well, if you're each joining a room,
That'd be
maybe
great.
doesn't matter, but
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, we'll wait till the other group comes back. They should be back soon. I'll just let Jessica know, but we had a great discussion and sharing of ideas in our group. Just give me one moment. I'm going to ask Jessica to come back unless, are they back?
no, it looks like they are still in their breakout room.
Okay. Let's see. Is there a way for?
I can close the room. That'll give them a minute.
Okay, yeah.
But do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the last person who was sharing, Yuki, is that how you say your name? How do you say your name?
Yokai.
Yokai. Okay.
Yes.
Did you get to finish what you were saying?
I did. I actually froze a little. I don't know if that happened to other people in the room.
Yeah. Well, so your video froze, but your voice didn't.
Oh, it didn't. Okay, because I couldn't see other people as well. And I barely heard what you were saying, Kathy. I know you were saying something. I saw your mouth moving, but I didn't quite hear you, which is what happens with technology. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was just really acknowledging how what you were doing with the small group instruction and just creating a space is an important way to practice translanguaging, that we know, as you said at the end, that we want to have a variety of flexible groups for different purposes, right? Sometimes we don't want all the same speakers in one group, but other times that is very productive space, right, for figuring things out. And I was just sharing an example with adolescent Somalis that I taught who were just learning to read and write in a language altogether. And they often, I gave them a chance to, you know, talk with each other. Well, let's take a few minutes here, and I want you all to talk in your language about the content that we're talking about here. Share with each other what you understand, ask each other questions. And I had no idea what they were saying, right? And one time they even asked me, well, how do you know, Mrs. Ramos, if we are actually paying attention and if we are not talking about something else? And I said, you know, I just kind of rely on my mom's sense. Like, I can tell. And then I'm going to ask you to share with me what you were saying and talking about. So yeah, that was a great example. Okay, everybody's back. Jessica, do you want to just reshare the questions? Okay. And I think we just really we want to save time for some questions and answers. So maybe we'll just take about 3 minutes on the next slide, Jessica. If we have people who want to share maybe something that you heard someone else say in the session that you thought was a great example of translanguaging, or one of your own, since the other people didn't get to hear that idea. Anybody who would like to share? Or maybe we'll pick one person from each group, Jessica. So I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, Kaylin, but I loved your paragraph museum. That's a beautiful idea that could be used in any grade level. So would you mind just sharing that a little bit?
Sure. So I was sharing with my group that I did a paragraph museum with some adult ESL students who were from, you know, maybe 5 or 6 different language groups. And one of our targets for the class was to write an academic English paragraph. So I had them write a paragraph in their own language first, and we put them on the walls of the classroom and did a gallery walk and discussed what they observed in each other's paragraphs. And so they just made observations about the different languages they saw. Some of them who shared languages were actually able to read each other's paragraphs and make comments about what I was sharing. That one student said, "Oh, you're a really beautiful writer," to another classmate. And it happened to be a student that I perceived as struggling. And so it really changed my attitude toward that student to realize that she was in fact a very talented, skilled writer. She simply was talented in a language that I couldn't understand. So then we were able to start our instruction about writing an English paragraph, but kind of keeping their paragraphs in their own languages elevated and on that equal footing of which I think is part of translanguaging pedagogy, right? That English is not the standard, but it's just another one in the toolbox.
Thank you, Kaylin, so much. What a beautiful example of a translanguaging stance and the way that translanguaging pedagogy can be transformative for learners and for educators too. Thanks for sharing that with us. Jessica, is there someone from your group or a share that you might have from your group?
Sure, I can share that many things were shared that they weren't too sure if that was in the right direction of translanguaging, but anything that is helping the students, you know, construct and build onto they're learning in either language, especially their home language, then that's fine. One of them was creating a slide once we switched to virtual learning instruction. I had one of the members in my group share out the different types of slides that they were trying to create to gauge student interest and have them make these connections in their home language. Another sharing was having the students write a piece in German in their home language, and then go ahead and talk to us as a whole group about it in English and share out what it was that they had mentioned. And one was a cultural event. There's a unit, and they were just trying to go back and forth how much they could do, but they saw that I was able to successfully do it with my students virtually. So that gave them some ideas on how they can go back to their co-teacher and share some of those ideas that they can implement to reinforce translanguaging practices.
Thank you. That's great. We had some other good ideas in our group too. And I think it just brings to mind that there isn't a right or wrong, right? It's really just about getting started and opening spaces. And once you engage in translanguaging practices, I think it becomes more natural and you see more opportunities. I think that, Jessica, do you want to go to the next slide? And yeah, we only have a few more minutes. So we do have a resource slide of digital tools at the end. Lots of digital tools that can be can access multiple languages there. And on the end slide, we have a list of resources for learning more, but you'll get all of that. So let's go back to the question and answer slide and just open it up for sharing questions, comments for presenters or peers in our last few minutes.
I guess I had a question for everyone. If people had experience or ideas around what a teacher should do in situations where there's maybe negative self-talk about a student's own language. Sometimes students say disparaging things about their own languages or maybe a classmate's language. So what are ideas around addressing that?
That's really a great question, Kaylin. And I think that your example actually is the perfect way to demonstrate how we might avoid that by, in my own experience, students follow the teacher's lead, right? So when we make all languages equally value, and when we welcome people to bring their cultures and languages into the classroom, and we make explicit statements about how cool and interesting it is that we all communicate in different ways, and look how long this looks in this language and how short this idea looks in this language, or how we organize our thinking when we're saying something in this language, and we just like make it a space where it's so fun and interesting to explore other languages. And we build that culture of respect and rapport in our classrooms, like you're doing with, you know, any type of activities with your paragraph gallery walk. Those are the kind of things I think that communicate the message to students that all languages are welcome in the classroom. Other thoughts on that or other questions?
There was a question in the chat about whether you would share the presentation. I assume it's on Canvas, is that right? Or will be?
I don't know that we put it on Canvas yet, so I think that we'd be happy to do that. Yeah.
I can do that right now. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So some of you may have joined this session from the conference program. If you haven't joined the Canvas website, you won't have access to that, but it's not too late to do that. You can join Canvas. You should have received an invitation directly to join it, and there's a link in the email that you received yesterday from WATESOL. And there's also space there for follow-up discussion if any of you want to participate in that.
Mm-hmm. So when people hear the recording, they don't see the slides unless it's
Yes, they will see the slides. I
Okay.
mean, they'll see it as we saw it.
Okay,
But I mean,
Okay.
sorry, I think people wanted access to the file itself, like to be able to, I don't know if there were links in there to click on.
yeah, okay.
But that's a great, so yes, the plan is also to post the recording to WATESOL's YouTube channel, so you could review it there and then see the slides as well.
Okay. I think Jessica shared that.
And within the last slide, on slide 18, you can click on the resources and there's links embedded on there as well.
Mhm. And the next slide as well. And Jessica, if you just want to put up the end slide with our email contact also, so people can see that we welcome you to reach out. And our time has come to a close. So we will just say muchas gracias for joining us today. It was really a pleasure, and thank you for your participation.
And the rest of us will say thank you to you, Kathy and Jessica, for an excellent presentation. Their email addresses should be found in the conference program as well, and again on the Canvas website. So if you can't access any of that, if you have any questions about accessing materials, you can email them, or if you can't find theirs, email PD for professional development, pd@watesol.org. Also, I just put in the chat the link to our conference survey. We just want to remind you to please fill that out at the end of the day and let us know how things went. And take a short break, step into the sunshine, find something to eat, and then we hope you'll join us at 12:15 for our keynote address.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Heather.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.